And we are live.
Hello.
So thank you everyone for joining. I am here in the nick of time, I have to add. I literally walked in the door here 4 minutes ago after sitting in wonderful Melbourne traffic. Dude, you are a champ. Thank you.
It's LA without the weather.
And I'm here with Tim Ruse, my friend.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
Likewise.
It's been well, actually, I was here a week ago or so.
That's true. Before that, it was some time.
But before that, it had been too long. So I'm really excited about this one. I think this is one of the more important webinars that I've done so far, and maybe one of the more important ones for the industry that I'll do this year. And so a little bit of background for those of you that don't know. First of all, chat window, it's open. You guys are seeing, say hi. If you have questions, I'll try to keep an eye on them and we'll try to address as many, if not all of the questions. A little bit of background. So Tim and I met at IAPA in 2016. 16. Might have been 15.
No, 15. That was 15. 15.
And I had and I'd gone down there actually to write an article, to research an article for Replay Magazine about why VR was bullshit. And they had a little demo down there that they had brought, and had all the startup pains when you first go to IAPA and you think you're going to do a live demo, right?
That's true. We got it working though.
And I did it. I actually was there with Brent Bushnell from 2-Bit Circus, and we wound up going in and doing it together. And I'll never forget, I walked out and I looked at Tim, and he'd never seen me before. And there's this big American, loud, obnoxious person literally came up, and I grabbed him. I gave him a bear hug.
I remember that.
And I said, "You did it." And he's looking up at me like, "What the fuck is this crazy American?"
I knew what you meant though. So I was like, yeah, we did.
And it was something that I dreamed about back in the laser tag days when we had VR and laser tag in malls, and we were like, if you could combine those, it would be amazing. Yeah. I never actually thought it would happen, and you did it. So so we wound up working together and for a couple of years, and wound up ending that engagement officially last summer.
Yes,
I was going on to do different things, and Zero Latency was kind of pivoting their business and having to do a digestion, which we're going to talk about, but. Go back to the beginning. Let's tell the story.
So look, I think like the first time that Zero Latency in my mind was ever, I guess, a seed was when Scott Van Donkler, who's our CTO and one of the 3 co-founders of Zero Latency, we worked together. The Oculus Rift had just come out. He'd actually been to attend one of these real life laser tag where people dress up as zombies and you play laser tag against some experiences. And it was lots of problems, and he goes, wouldn't it be cool if you could smash the Oculus Rift and motion capture together? You could have these massive multiplayer experiences, and the Oculus Rift hadn't even come out. And I was like, that's incredible. I think a lot of people have had that dream. I was like, I reckon I can sell it. You're smart enough to build it. Let's bring Keel in, who's a hardware expert and computer forensic analyst and a really smart guy. And we just started working on it. It became a complete obsession. It was in like late 2012, early 2013. We started building backpacks from scratch from the computer store. We didn't even have an Oculus Rift at the time. We just had like a car reversing monitor mounted on a piece of wood, and we would, just started building this dream out.
So I want to paint that picture. So here's a little LCD monitor on a wooden fake gun stock, and they would walk around really close. It was virtual reality.
With a little glowing ball on the front. So like for the tracking system. So that was. Man, that took a long time. It probably took almost like 12 months to just get that prototype up and running. But once that was up and running, it was on. We got the Rift, we connected it. Sort of fast forward, we opened our first venue in Melbourne. It sold out like for weeks and months in advance. And I guess that's part of being the first to ever do something in that commercial realm. And yeah, it's been a big journey since then. And the company's grown and grown. We're all over the world, I think in like 20 countries now. And yeah, really excited about what we're doing next, which is we've been in the lab with a pen and a pad for probably like 12 months since March, just getting the whole business, and what we've essentially been doing is working on disrupting ourselves, which has been a really exciting challenge. I love new products. Sort of what drives me in the business. I mean, R&D is very much in the DNA of what we do as a company. And we identified really like earlier than probably March, but like slam tracking, there's a nexus coming of like, there's issues with all location-based VR. It's expensive, it's tricky to set up. There's a lot of technical complexities, a lot of cost in rigging cameras. We're watching quite closely what Microsoft was doing with Windows Mixed Reality, but there was just all these gaps, and we kind of approached them, and they approached us at IAPA in 2017. And Alakan, who works there, is a fantastic guy, and he's like, look, I think there's a potential synergy here, and we agree. He's like, I'm just getting everyone on board. And then essentially in March, we met up with him in San Francisco. He's like, look, everyone gets it. They think this is a really great way to bring VR to the people. It's going to help get it into the homes. It's a big strategic push from Microsoft. What do you think? And we're like, we believe we can make it work with not a huge amount of changes. We gave them a laundry list of things to work on the Windows operating system. And like away we went. We essentially become like an outsourced development testing wing for Microsoft for this period of time.
Yeah, and so let's let's back up to the disruption thing, right? So I remember at Laser Storm, like we had a really good thing. It did really well, but we realized at some point in our growth stage, it's like, all right, there's a lot of competition, right? There was very little barrier to entry. All of a sudden, there's a lot of noise in the market. What can we do to create the next thing? And we actually were never able to do it. And what we did is we wound up, we did theming. That's not necessarily fair. So we did a bunch of theming. We did some individual scoring stuff. We did some incremental innovation that extended our runway, but ultimately we tried to pivot into operations, which is really hard. Especially when you have a DNA of a manufacturer, the operations culture and mentality is very different. We were never able to actually disrupt ourselves and come up with the next thing. Talk about a little bit about the mindset that required, and what did you go through? Like, what's that like?
Well, we're a little bit of both. Like, we operate our own venues, so we get that. But then just like building technology, deploying technology, building hardware, manufacturing content is like a massively that's enough work for a company. Our sites do well, and we love that bit of the business. And the most important thing is having that connection, like we are our own customer, which I think is really helpful. I guess the disruption mindset for us is something that, like, we are technologists fundamentally. We're a very like developer-driven company. Increasingly, sort of changing some of that culture for because you want to kind of keep you need to be customer focused as well. But there's a lot of developers here, and we are constantly looking at what's next. Like and I guess that to walk that back of why are we doing that is like we didn't start Zero Latency to make a quick buck trying to sell a bunch of systems. We want to have like a global network of sort of VR battle domes. We believe we can network these things together. It's an incredibly compelling medium of entertainment. The more that people play it, like especially, when you've been in the lab in 2014 for months and you start putting these headsets on people who never played VR and they come out, they're having a tracked experience, like minds are completely blown, and you just get that visceral reaction. You're like, this is compelling entertainment. Like people, like one of the guy, Aki, who's the creative director at Sega, said to me, he goes, when I tried Zero Latency, I hadn't been this excited about technology since the PlayStation, like direct quote. And you have that effect on people who are seasoned veterans. You're like, we have to keep doing this. This is compelling. And the disruption mindset is going, we don't want to just have 30 of these. We don't want this to be a niche product. We think this has a chance, like VR generally and free roam VR specifically has a chance of being a real mainstream, compelling entertainment offering. It has an opportunity to be a competitive sport, not even an esport. It's a physical sport with a digital overlay. You can tell stories in that is very difficult. But you can tell stories. You can take people to completely different places, and that's what's driving our development. And you can't bring something into the mainstream. It's got to be you've got to be driving the complexity down. You've got to be partnering with people as quickly as you can. To really be getting into as many people's hands as possible and bringing in other technology partners. Like with the Microsoft and HP piece, like we haven't opened the kimono completely, but we said to them, look, this is stuff that we know you need to fix, and we could probably fix it ourselves, but we want you to be building an operating system that we can use and ultimately the industry can use, because it's very difficult for VR to grow when you're inside a small 3x3, 4x4 meter box. That's a difficult creative canvas for anyone to make compelling content on ongoing. Larger spaces are better. It's going to become easier and easier to deploy into those large spaces. I mean, what we've done with the Windows Mixed Reality platform and HP, it's been a massive challenge. Like we have spent like hundreds of hours just testing it, bringing in people, operating it, like to get it from a proof of concept to something that you can actually put 8 people in reliably. That's a massive leap. And that's
the thing I think a lot of people don't understand is they look at the core technology around inside-out tracking, and you use the term SLAM. So for those of you that are not, and I don't know, what is SLAM? Do you know what it stands for?
It's shared, it's spatial. Oh, I've forgotten it.
Yeah, something like that. I always forget.
It's essentially rather the concept is rather than outside in where cameras are looking where you are and then relaying that back to a server and then pushing it back out to the backpack over Wi-Fi super fast. There it is.
Go, simultaneous location and mapping.
Thank you, Albert. Thank you.
Slam. And what that means is basically it's tracking where each person is, and it's tracking the environment and putting that person in relation to the environment and the other people in the environment. And that's often the hard part, right? Is tracking all the other people in a way that you can do it safely.
And tracking people and making sure it's also something that, we can train somebody on to press a button and it works and all that. Like, that's what Zero Latency spends a lot of time on is, like, internally, we sort of call it trying to make like the AK-47 of virtual reality. Like, you want to be able to leave it in the mud and hose it down and just clunk, clunk. It's not that simple, but turn it off and on again. And then that's, you're kind of away, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah. And Steve was asking about the Void and
no, the Void uses OptiTrack. And with props in an environment, it's going to be very, very challenging for you to get SLAM tracking working properly and making multiple people in it, because like our thesis has always been they to your answer, is it Andre, yeah. So Andre, when they lose tracking, they come back super fast. So that's one thing that we've been testing extensively and iterating through with Microsoft. We need these changes. You acquire tracking, you get tracking, and then it's about making sure that it stays in. And it's super reliable once it's in. It's amazing. And one of the most important things about it as well, so apart from the fact you don't need to be rigging a space, putting in cameras,
running 10 miles of cable.
Yeah, running cable, putting in the server room, is that it's also localized tracking. So the slight drift you get with optical is removed, and the responsiveness is way quicker because you're actually processing some of it locally. So you're actually getting a localized effect. And then you actually have to have, then you're essentially beaming that up. So it makes it really, really compelling for like more of a competitive platform because it's a lot more responsive.
Yeah. And so one of the things I did a webinar about a month ago with the guys from Holodeck VR, and they've been testing, and we had I showed some graphs around testing for inside out tracking headsets in a large space over time. Yeah. And what we've seen is a lot of drift. And I know in the early implementations of Windows Mixed Reality, the test that I did, they also had drift. And so what have they done from a technical standpoint to lock down, it's about locking down the point cloud, I think. And so what are they doing differently that Oculus and HTC with those all-in-one headsets are going to struggle with? Because I think there's a difference between having a platform from a company like Microsoft and having a headset with inside-out tracking. Can you talk about that?
Only a little bit without going into too much stuff that I'm not allowed to talk about, but the short version, and I hate to circuit break that, is they have solved that problem. Yeah. With our assistance, sorry, I'm banging the table. With our assistance. So but it's a really big part of it that shared, being able to have a shared experience and have that reliable is super, super important. Yeah. But it's interesting as well, like from like where we've been working on it, and we've carved off, like we started in March last year with like 4 people, and then we rapidly built out the development team. So there's like 12 or 14 people working on it now. It's only been since January that we've been confidently going, okay, we can get this working consistently. Now we need to test it and operationalize it. So we probably got 80% of the way there in January, and we're, running that last 20%. So it's interesting to see, even with us doing it full time as a business, with all this location-based expertise and all this knowledge, and a partner like Microsoft with a plugged directly into their dev team. It's been a really long journey because it is super challenging to have to set it up in a room with 1 person, 2 people. Okay, set up in a warehouse with all these different environmental variables, light, everything. It's super complicated, even with someone like Microsoft on board. So it hasn't been. It's been a really interesting journey. I find it I like it. I like that sort of cut and thrust of R&D. But it's interesting to see why it's really only in 2019 that it's become okay. We can hit go on this. If you know what I mean? It's been up to that point You'd solve a problem, you'd find a problem. Solve a problem, find a problem. Yeah, that's really normal for R&D.
And so I think that we've got these big companies moving into the space, and you're seeing the tracking systems. Andre's asking about outside in. The demo I did, you're eliminating.
Yeah,
right?
We've removed them. And as I said, that's
and I was surprised to see that. By the way, I was assuming. My assumption coming in, thinking about what your implementation was going to be, is that you would lighten the load on your outside in, but still keep some of your machine vision in there.
It's got to be an all or nothing thing. I mean, to continue to push this technology forwards. It's that it really is a completely new platform. It's a paradigm shift in what we do, and we bring all our content across, all our knowledge, all our web services. like the deployment and maintenance of everything that we do in terms of software and hardware, and a bunch of stuff under the waterline, I call it, that makes it all work seamlessly for an operator. But that all comes across. But that core tracking and delivery technology is completely different. And there's been a lot of work to, it's certainly not from a dev point of view, to turn it into a plug and play system for an operator. There's a lot of work.
And I think that's something that a lot of solution providers are underestimating, which I've been very vocal about in both publicly and privately with them, is that they build this system that is easy to demonstrate or easy to run if they're there or the dev team is there running it in their back office or their first location. Yeah. But when you put it in the hands of a third-party operator and they've got a teenager running it or a 19-year-old kid, who's also, watching his Instagram feed while he's running the system, there's a whole lot of invisible shit that has to happen to make it usable. And you guys, in my opinion, have always been way out in front of the competition.
That's why we, we've been, I guess it's super fast. We've essentially turned around under 12 months to a point where we can now start to, go and basically launch it into the market. And, we're starting to ship these in May. But yeah, it's a lot. That final piece of getting that all operational has been a big job, and it's not something that even right now, we're putting it's in operational testing now. So, and we with everything we do want to bake it in. Yeah. Like, you've got to put it in, and the last thing we want is to be deploying these things all over the world, and then you've got 20 sites and we've got a problem, and you need to find a solution for it. So making sure that we've put a lot of I guess rubber to the road or photons to the wall would probably be a better way to describe it with SLAM tracking, but making sure that we have tested many permutations is super, super important, because you do not, even the difference of getting the developers running tests and then putting in the hands of a trained zero latency game master, even that step is which we've just done. It's okay, well, here's a bunch of stuff that we need to fix or change or put it back into the product, because it needs to be and increasingly, I guess, player-led. Yeah.
And look, and that's the nice thing about a company that's got an install base. You have retail operations, you've got a run rate now. You don't have to rush it to market before it's ready, right? Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of companies that are trying to throw this stuff into the market because you spend a lot of money as a startup, as a development, and you're dumping money in. And at some point you want money to come back on that. And oftentimes companies rush their products to market before they're ready. And then the customer, the operator, pays the price of that, right? And so there's a couple of questions coming up. So let's talk about the limitations of the solution, right? So you guys, most of your stuff is gun based. Yeah. So you're good at tracking a gun which you hold with two hands out in front of you.
It's still super important bit of it, I think.
What are some of the limitations of this that might make it hard? Like you said, the Void is really going to have a hard time doing something like this because of environmental objects that are in there. What are some of the limitations of the inside out stuff and the platform that you see?
It's a good question. So we still have a weapon, and I think that's the controller is super important, because when you take the eyes and ears are dominant sensors, you take those over, it's really immersive. Having something in your hand that matches to the game, I think you don't notice it till it's not there. Like, we did some experiments early on with just the controllers. It doesn't feel as compelling. Even with a pistol, it's just not quite right. And your proprioception, which is, the bits that understand where your hands are when your eyes are closed, also just the way your body relates to objects is really specific, even though, especially when you're feeding in visuals, you've got to have a lot of that illusion working. So the controller is still super important. It's also a safety thing that you're not going to flail around the gun. So yeah, that's been really, really important. And then we've essentially mounted the Windows mixed reality tracking onto the front of that, which is a pretty impressive thing, because it does, it's moving around a lot. There's multiple in the space, and I'm consistently impressed with that.
And that has not only IMU, but there's optical tracking from the headset as well, right? Yeah. So it's a combination
So all tracking is happening on the player, essentially, and you're linked into this controller.
So if that controller goes out of the view of the headset, so if you were to put it on your hand, like somebody was asking you to throw a baseball, and I put my hand behind my head, it's going to lose tracking at some point if it goes out of range of view of the headset, right? So there's a physical limitation of what you have to design the experience, and you have to do this with any technology. Is you have to design within the limitation constraints of the technology, but that actually is a good thing.
And also there's like giving away too many secrets, we've fixed that problem as well. Like, that does happen, but then there's things you need to do to make sure that that's not a problem. And that's part of the iterative testing of it, and game, like putting it into game design and seeing how it goes. Because like controls at the moment, for example, you can put it on the ground and leave the room and it still knows where it is in the space. That's a different operational constraint It's a different operation. It has operational constraints, but it's a different, like Windows Mixed Reality solves problems, but also introduces them.
Yeah.
It's not a silver bullet. It's not the Matrix.
Yeah.
Sadly, it's still, it's awesome and it solves a lot of problems. And most importantly, which is why we are spending so much time and energy on it, we want to make sure that like it's key for operators to be rolling out this tech, because it's just going to make it so much easier and more cost effective for them to deploy free roam VR systems. Even though it's in some ways it's more difficult for us to in certain sections to make sure we take something complicated to easy. From an operator's point of view, it's going to be a game changer.
So let's talk about. We'll come back to these questions. I'm going to start some of these questions. We're going to come back to them, but I want to move the conversation along. There's a bunch of stuff I want to touch on. And so talk about. Let's step to 50,000 feet.
Yeah.
And this notion of like you guys came to market with a pretty proprietary hardware stack, right? Of servers and tracking systems and backpacks, and you had to invent everything. You literally had to cobble together a stack that was really complex, therefore really expensive.
Yes.
Now all of a sudden we're seeing a democratization of hardware, backpack computers from HP and MSI, et cetera, Zoltak. You've got tracking systems now. Lighthouse 2.0 is opening up the space. And I know people that are tracking. I've played a 6-player, 1,000 square foot Lighthouse 2.0, and it's going to go to 2,000 square feet. So Lighthouse 2.0, people are figuring that out. Like, so I see this split between inside out tracking and Lighthouse 2.0 tracking, and and there's going to be 2 branches. They're both going to be democratized and kind of off the shelf. Like the work you're doing with Microsoft, I assume, is going to work its way into the platform to make it easier for your competitors to buy that shit and compete with you. So talk about that, like the democratization of hardware and platforms, and what does that mean to the operator, and what does it mean to you and from a competitive landscape?
Yeah, that's a good question. The like the reason that we've gone down, like we played with, we experimented extensively with Lighthouse. We experimented with active tracking, optical active tracking. We experimented with radio frequency stuff, all sorts of crazy shit, to be honest, we put into the mix, and came out with SLAM tracking for a variety of reasons. And it's interesting to see as all new headsets get announced, they're all SLAM tracking. Because nobody wants to set up a beacon. Ain't no one got time for that. And it's also, even with our experimentation with the Lighthouse, it has its limitations. It really does. When you, and I think your point's really good about that, that 0 to 1's hard, but 1 to 5 or 1 to 2 is super difficult. So yes, you can get it running as a tech demo, but then getting it reliable, making sure you can deploy it, that you can actually be either talking to someone through on the phone how to fix it, because you've got to be sending, operators out. If you've got to be sending techs out every 2 weeks to tweak the base station. So it's interesting from my understanding, most, like every major company is going down the SLAM path. Just makes a lot of sense. And
even the new HTC headset, right? The Cosmos has SLAM tracking built in, and we'll see what.
So that's going to be
Valve,
the winner, and I think
what Valve does.
Like that'll be the winner. I guess so. The good thing is that it's good and bad. It's very good for us and difficult for the competition. Is it's not just like, it's a bit like mountain climbing. Like getting a technology stack is base camp. Like that's that, and a lot of people win on the way. I mean, you look at what Zero Latency's done. Like even when we built our own proprietary tracking, the reason we did that is we looked at OptiTrack, and it's like at that stage it was like 500 or 600 grand Australian just for the cameras, and it's like that's completely, it's just not going to work. No one can afford to buy that, so we built our own. We proved the market, we led the charge. OptiTrack started getting a lot of orders, and their prices came down. But it's still, you can still replicate a zero latency system off the shelf equipment. But it's still challenging to operate it well. I think like the reason our customers come back and buy systems is, we're here 24/7. We're building content. We're working with them. If their technology has problems, or on the phone, that after support is really important. Also, compelling content. Like I've played a lot of VR, and there's a lot of it still, even though people can come to us or competitors and copy good ideas, it's still really hard and expensive to make good content. It's hard to make it feel fun and repeatable. Like all that stuff's a real big challenge. And that's sort of what you're stacking on top of that base camp. Plus, I guess there's brand recognition, and then there's a lot of IP in the background that makes this possible. Like we have, like I watch competitors pop up all the time, and sometimes I sweat, and sometimes I like, oh, that's great, because you're going to hit a brick wall with that, mate. So that's going to really hurt you in 6 to 12 months time. And you can see that time and time again, because there's things that we have done. We probably need to talk about them more, but it's also good to keep them a bit quiet. Like there's things that we've done and rabbit holes we've gone down that are dead ends. And you can spend a lot of time and money going down those rabbit holes. So I think it's part of why So yeah, there's that element. And then also the competition, like we made a decision really like in March, Scott and I were like, right, we see this happening. We've got traction. We're not going to get an exclusive deal with these companies, nor is it reasonable to ask for it. All we expect is to get a head start.
Yeah.
That's all we need.
Yeah.
Because we're the fastest and we're the best at what we do. So we just want to be on the front foot with this. And we've seen the future, and then having that validation of going, right, you guys see this as well. You're supporting this platform. Fantastic. That's a whole bunch of stuff that I don't need to worry about anymore. Let's get busy on the other stuff that we can bring value. And that's which is really interesting. And I think it's also, it's kind of the fun bits as well. It's the content and how do you link sites together and do leads. It's not as much okay, how do we get 3 things and turn it into a backpack.
And one of the things I'll throw out here is that I think that one of the risks that I've talked about for a long time is for operators is, how do you know when the right time to invest in a certain technology is, that you're not like, because you don't want to buy the thing on the end of the technology curve, right? And this was, to be totally honest, this was one of the challenges I think we had in the BD that I was doing for you guys, was I felt like, I kind of knew that we were on the back end of that technology curve, and people were paying a lot of money for technology that ultimately was going to be replaced by something a lot more cost effectively. And so now what you're doing is, now people coming in, I'm just going to say this right to everybody watching. If you're thinking about getting into free roam VR, for the last 6 months, I've been like, fucking hold off. Like, this is not the time to buy. I'm going to tell you right now, like, this is the time to buy, because you're on the front end of a whole new technology curve. And this stuff's going to be good for several years before the next technology comes out. And if you can get into something that works now, you're going to be safe with your investment for the next several years. And so talk about how, respond to that.
Yeah, I think there's 2 elements to that. So how did Zero Latency deal with that? Like mid last year, we changed our commercial arrangements basically, with a lot of deals with being signed, and people are paying for exclusivity as an example, like, locking down markets. That's a big part of what Zero Latency does with a lot of its earlier partners. They want a piece of a market, they want to hold that, and that's fine. We've done that. Also allowing white labeling. We've stopped all that. So we changed, and we also lowered the price. We lowered the amount of packs that you needed. We changed the commercial model and also acknowledged that. And I think there's also another thing I'll throw out, which I talked about as well. Is like being in the market, you're making money. Like, you're starting to sell tickets, you're building your audience. The sooner you're in the market, the sooner you're building your commercial arrangement in your market. And so there's actually an advantage to moving fast too, regardless of the tech stack. Because the customers, well, you've got people who are, there's that. And then also with our existing partners, we've gone out with a fantastic deal to, do it below cost to upgrade them. And that's an open deal for as long as they can do that whenever they want. We're not going to put a window on that. It's about bringing them with us. We're still going to support Gen 1. Plus, Gen 1, it still works. It's not just about the amount of pixels in the headset. It's about the content. It's about the GMs. It's about the operator's ability to run a business and market it and get good rent and all that stuff that you just need to be able to do. It's not an ATM. It's about a ticketing system that does high conversion. Like, there's a lot to it. There's a lot. And we see that, with the high operators, they're the ones that are great at, cross-selling and bringing people in and remarketing and everything. All that stuff's still relevant. Plus, look, if you're a VR aficionado and you're gonna know that I tried. I've got a new Vive at home. Zero Latency's OSVR stack is not as good, but for the vast majority of the people who are coming and who you want to be attracting, they just want to come and do something fun with their friends. Like it's people are still playing Time Crisis, because for different reasons they will play a PlayStation at home. So it's not just about the technology. It's a whole bunch of other stuff as well. And yes, it's good. I agree with you. This technology is certainly going to be there for some time, the new SLAM tracking. But I think that, we're still seeing great, great user scores and great throughput through the Gen 1 systems, because it's not just about the tech. And increasingly people, I think, are realizing that, like, they're selling, you look at the phone market, people are selling less about pixels and horsepower. And it's now more about the experience and the ecosystem and how do I make all that work. And increasingly the tech will be transparent. And I think increasingly people don't really care. Like, I think the people that come to Zero Latency that aren't the early adopters, they, like, 75% of them hear about it through friends or through social media, and they've been told, hey, this is a fun thing to do. You should go shoot a zombie, or you should go play Singularity, or go play Soul Raiders, or see if I can kick your ass. That is what's bringing people, not like, oh, you've got to try out the new HP headset. It's an enabler. Totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. And I think people overblow the technology. They the things that they focus on are resolution, which nobody really cares about. But do people care about frame rate? So there's a question about frame rate.
What frame rates, were you getting on the old stuff? How are you seeing that? Is it changing in the new stuff? Because frame rate does make a difference, right? If there's one thing I think that you want to pay attention to in VR to make sure that there's a comfort factor.
On these questions?
I can go to the star ones here, and that shows the star ones. So, frame rate. What's the frame rate? Is it changing? That was the first one.
Yeah, frame rate. Like we target 90 frames a second, but you can go lower than that for brief moments of time without putting people off, as long as you just don't want to lose beats in your tracking. Or your packet delivery. That's the bigger issue. Like, you're having a high intensity explosion on screen, your frame rate going down to 30 frames a second. It's different to refresh rate, but your 30 frames a second in game frames is not a problem as long as it goes back up. It's more that, I've lost 1,000 packets through the Wi-Fi network. Therefore, I've lost half a second of tracking. Therefore, I have traveled 3 meters without tracking, and therefore I've smashed myself into somebody. That's a bigger issue than the frame rate thing. But they're certainly the frame rates on the actual like frame rate refresh rate, the hertz on the OSVRs has been like good. It's completely enough. And from what we're seeing as well with the Windows mixed reality stuff, it's really good. It's interesting as well, like the OSVR. So that's our Gen 1 headset that we work with Sensix to customize it for our needs. Because there is stuff that those older, like fully enclosed headsets are not great for location-based VR. They are swampy in there and they're difficult to maintain, and they don't work particularly well in high throughput physical experiences. You're putting someone in for a tethered experience for a few minutes is different to walking through a space and sweating for 30 minutes. But with these new headsets, they're more suited for these needs without the customization.
And the Windows you're using, the one I did was the HP headset.
Yes.
Is that the one you're going to bring to market?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what is the resolution, just to make sure people don't think you're dancing around that?
Oh, I can't remember, to be honest.
But it's Vive Pro better, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna push the envelopes on that. And then there's a question here. Andre's asking about 6 people in 2,000 square feet. First of all, you run up to 8 players.
Yeah, 8 players.
But you mentioned like some more coming flexibility as far as size and configuration. What does Slam do for that?
So we basically, there's 2 elements to that with Gen 2 and sort of putting them together. So the issue is, can we get the price down? And can we get an entry level price? And the answer is yes. We sort of rewind that back a little bit, talking about I guess Slam, what the impact of that is. At the moment, the flag for one player is high because you need all the cameras and outside tracking, and now you don't need that as much. You basically you don't need to have. You can get one player in for a lot more cost effective. So we're gonna open with a 10 pack package essentially for $199,000 US, because I think that's enough technology for people to get into it. And then we can add more backpacks as you go. I mean, obviously as part of the sales process, you talk to people about where it's going to be and how, like, you've got more people cleaning backpacks, you don't need as many. And there's a whole discussion, to be honest, around that. But be able to go to market and go, this is Slam tracking. We can get you in, like, we're confident this is going to go mainstream. We're going to get people in for under 200K USD. This will get you set up. And then depending on the economics of your business, you can put in different add-ons, which is really, really important. But what we've done, so then the other thing is people are like, look, it's really hard to get a 10-meter span. It's just difficult. So,
and that's space between columns,
the space between
right?
columns, because buildings have roofs and columns hold up roofs. So yes, physics. I know it's unescapable. So what we've done is basically make a series of customized sizes with some, just some smarts in terms of the content team. So now it can go down to 8 by 16, which is closer to 25-foot spans, because it's not the length that's a problem. So that's another thing, because people come on board, they get excited, then they try to find real estate. So making sure.
Grab my calculator here. And you said 8 by 16. That's meters, right?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
I'll do that for you guys. Don't worry about it. Keep listening.
Yeah, but Logan, the quests don't work in a multiplayer location-based environment, mate. If you ask a question about 10 quests for 3,200, like, I would love that to work, but it's not a thing currently.
And that's the thing that we did. I don't know if you were in earlier, but like there's a massive amount of drift in the Quest and the Vive Focus. They just, like, you put a bunch of people. Yeah, anybody can run a demo at a trade show, right? And so we've done, one of the companies I do some work with, Holodeck's been testing the Vive and the Focus, and and the Quest, and they're just not ready for prime time yet.
I see your comment, Logan. You can choose to believe me or not.
Yeah,
you just need to trust me on that, mate.
Yeah.
It's not a thing at the moment.
Yep.
Yeah. So to avoid confusion, so Sebastian's got a question. So look, we've tested 8 players in our 185 square meter. Like, and also we've been customizing anyway. People come to us and we've been just putting that into the mix anyway. So 8 players in that space, it's good. We were testing it the other day with our player versus player game, which is super fast, with good game design and good safety systems. It's plenty of space to put 8 players in. Don't get me wrong, if you could have an old Best Buy shell and have 4 people in that for 2 hours, that would be a better experience, but there's ain't no one going to make that money on that. So,
and you've got that in Melbourne, like your first site in Melbourne, 4,000 square feet, right?
Which is great, and people love that.
But you're also running 200 square meter games in the 400 square meter space too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's so for 199,000 USD, that's for 10. So it's always 8 players, but from what we're seeing from some of our competition, plus the market saying, look, I don't necessarily feel I need 18 or 20 backpacks. Can I have less?
Yeah.
And we're responding to that by going, yes, you can, if you feel, and we'll walk you through and be really open with the data we have and giving you an understanding of what that is. But yeah, you get 10 packs, the equipment you need to run the game space. So we used to, just to wind that back for people that might not have dealt with us or done business with us, we very much at the start were like, right, turnkey package, everything you need. It comes in these 2 big black wrapped crates, and Zero Latency employee unwraps them and sets it all up for you. And that's great, but that also only appeals to one bit of the market. Like, people are saying, look, why can't I buy a computer from Best Buy? The answer to that is there's compatibility issues and we need to be able to run software on them. But we have changed some of what we do in the back end and made it easier and just being more flexible. It's like, okay, we don't really want to ship a computer from Australia to America if we don't have to. So let's talk about how we get people buying things locally. And
now that doesn't mean somebody can just go to Best Buy and buy any computer, strap it on a vest, and put it in the arena, right? I just want to be clear.
So talking more like we used to, for example, send a spectator machine, which meant that you could watch it in the lobby. That's not necessary. But certainly the computer's on your back. I mean, we intend to be drop shipping as quickly as we can, but as we talked about at the start of the podcast, it's really important to not, like, we want to make sure they work when they arrive, and making sure that, sending a specialist there to get you set up and get you comfortable and answer your questions is still a really important part of Zero Latency's process. Because it's important that people feel, that they have a connection to the company, that they meet people, that they're shown how it all works and can answer the questions.
Yeah, I
think in the future there'll be drop shipping, absolutely.
Yeah. So there's a lot of questions about Quest. Now what's happened is that there's question about tracking systems, and now we're getting into inside out tracking and SLAM. And now there's noise around Quest, and there's noise around Vive Focus, and so let's just talk a bit about the Windows system from your perspective versus the all-in-one headsets, which are based on mobile chipsets, right? And so for those, Quest and Focus are basically cell phones technology in an all-in-one headset, and I'm not demeaning them in any way. The 835 chipset's great. I think the 845 is going to be better, and the 855 with 5G is where I think that's the next, as a bit of a futurist. I talked about getting in on the curve. Getting in now with the Windows system on inside-out tracking makes a lot of sense, or even the Vive Focus. The next big one is going to be 5G and the 855 chipset, which is still a couple of years away. But go ahead.
But also as well, like anything, with inside-out tracking, like the drifting is real, and the way that things move. Like, the bigger the space, I wouldn't say it's exponential. I haven't got the graph in front of me, but it gets more complicated in terms of making sure that tracking's working, making sure it's consistent, and the more players you put in, it just makes it more and more difficult. And dangerous. Like, if you don't track the people accurately, and they do run, especially when you get into competitive games, you can't stop it. You can try. People will bump into each other. Yeah, absolutely. So I think. I'm excited about all-in-one headsets. I think they're going to come of age eventually. It's not going to be this year. It's probably not going to be next year. From what we can gather from the market and speaking to people, it's just not. The complexity is not there. Plus, you think about, yes, you've got a Quest, it's got a battery. Like, how long does your phone last when you're putting it at 110% graphical power? The answer is not very long. It gets super hot. That was a Gear VR roller coaster problem. Like, there's still a lot of stuff in a prop in Bob's phone or general phones that needs to be solved before there's something into location-based entertainment. Plus, if you want to get out of a room scale experience, look, I think they're great. I love the fact it's going down that path, but we're not there yet. And even and the idea of like, I have a dream that one day you'll be able to pick up a multifunction device and go and play, PUBG at the park or whatever. But I think we're way away from that. Even with 5G, I debate that. I think it will, but I think
people said that in the 90s, 80s about laser tag too. It's never happened.
But I still think like also, people want good graphics as well. Like you've got to be able to push the envelope, and the more like people's bar for like, if you're at home I downloaded Fortnite for free, look at the graphics, like,
and that's why 5G, like the ability to stream 3D 360-degree environments stereoscopically. It's going to take 5G, and 5G is not going to be rolling out for a couple of years in practical terms. Though there are some companies that are actually experimenting with it on local basis, so we'll see what that happens. But realistically, I don't think you're going to see the mobile. And the other thing I'm going to put a flag in the mobile headset conversation. The Vive Focus isn't great. Like, I'm getting a lot of feedback from developers that are using it and they don't love it. The Oculus Quest is amazing, but Oculus does not give a fuck about location-based VR. They've hired one person in the entire organization who has that in their title, and I can't even get them to fucking show up at a conference. So I don't actually think Oculus gives a rat's fuck, despite showing Dead and Buried, which made a great media publicity stunt. But that's really what it was, from my opinion.
Not to like, I wish Oculus would just get out of the echo chamber and put down the Kool-Aid, because if they think that SLAM tracking is the barrier to entry for their headsets, they're tripping. It's not the problem. It's the room scale is too small. It doesn't. People don't want it. I mean, you look at what moved the needle more than SLAM tracking for adoption of VR headsets was Beat Saber being on PlayStation, because it's a compelling thing to do at home. It's a great game.
Yeah,
like one dude made that, because like throwing rant in 5 seconds, but like throwing tens of millions of dollars at AAA studios to make console games for your headset is not a way to do it.
Yeah.
Like you've got to put it in the hands of innovators who are like, oh, you know what? I'm going to make this thing that no one's thought of. Like, that's how you paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Like that's how, look, 10 years ago, if you said, you're going to be able to actually make 7 figures or 8 figures playing video games online, you'd be laughed at.
Yeah.
And now you've got, it's an industry. Like it's not, and that didn't happen because YouTube showered cash on a Swedish dude. Like, it just happened organically, and that's increasingly what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So last thing, Andre, your question, how you resolve drifting with the mobile headsets is you have to have a hybrid tracking system. You have to have something else other than that to lock down and to provide that. And we've talked about that on another webinar. Go to my YouTube channel, watch the webinar with the Holodeck guys. We go into that in great detail. Their head of development is actually writing their thesis on RF and inside out tracking, and they have a lot of information on that. And let's talk about Soul Raiders.
Yeah, sweet. Love that game.
So
that's a bot.
So that's what is that? What is it? What is Soul Raiders?
So Soul Raiders is our player versus player content. We're pushing real hard to turn that into a competitive sport. So what it is a game where it's teams of up to 4x4, and you're playing over 3 maps. To essentially compete for this futuristic energy source. I guess the narrative conceit of it is we've become interplanetary species, and we basically exist by dropping these bots through these alien portals that can't take organic matter.
So you're saying Elon Musk was successful ultimately?
Yeah, exactly. And he was actually an evil genius. And essentially there's these alien portals, and you're dropping these robots through these rifts, which is cool because that's why the bots keep spawning. And it's kind of nice to have like its backstory, but it's kind of cool to have a game that makes sense when you dig into it. But what you do is you basically jump into the game. Sorry, comments keep popping up. I don't know how streamers cope with this.
Just don't look at it. I know. I'll handle the comments. I'll ask you the questions.
I'm 42.
I'll ask you the questions.
I'm not a streamer. So basically this game, it's competitive, and it's been a really fun evolution. Like, we've been working on that game for 15 months. It's our most ambitious title, new creative director, a lot of new team members. It's been really, really refreshing to get that new stuff into the system. But before that, we spent 6 months doing all these tests. Like, the first time we did player versus player, we turned on all the backpacks in the building, and we got to 13 before the tracking system couldn't cope. And we just went, right, turn on friendly fire in this 4,000 square foot map. And it wasn't fun. It's just like, if you're facing down with automatic weapons against another group of people, it doesn't last long. And so we sort of refined it. We tried class-based stuff. We tried different maps, like different sort of moving platforms and all this stuff. And what we've landed on, to sort of flash forward, is what we found with Soul Raiders is we got a great sort of shooter mechanic, like working with cover and kind of like shooting distances and getting that refined. but it still wasn't quite there. And then like, let's put in an objective and let's see how that, and it's a complete game changer. So the whole game is that you're either going after these data canisters, which are a static object that you've got to acquire, or you're moving these so-called balls. So it feels a bit like one level feels like basketball. It's super fast. You go bang, bang. You've got to pick up these things and move really quick. Some of them feel more like soccer, where you've got to work as a team to push up these cores. But that dynamic's really important because it not forces in a bad way, but it does force social interaction, because it's not about kills. It's about goal acquisition. And that's been an absolute game changer. And to watch our Alpha Army, we call them, who are our basically volunteers and that come in and just test our games. They get a lot of free VR. They come in and test it. Switching that paradigm was just an absolute game changer. Yeah. So,
and so one of the things that I talk about,
it's payload, exactly. Payload in game terms. Yeah. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
And one of the things I talk about in game design that a lot of companies coming into the space just don't understand, one is game design. But two is like the idea of game mechanics and core loops. And so you've got multiple core loops in this game, which really drives repeat playability. And it's easy to play, it's easy to learn, but the ramp up as far as strategy is really, I found really compelling.
Yeah.
And I also think the thing is that people want social experiences. The research overwhelmingly says people want social experiences, and just putting a bunch of people VR without curating the social experience of why do they have to play together? Yes. If you could play laser tag by yourself with a room of 20 people and have fun, but you're playing by yourself. Yeah. In this game, you can kind of do that, but it's so much more fun to play as part of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And like it's that increasingly, and we found that when we had one person in the game and we put two people in, just seeing that interaction, even as they're just playing it, in the early startup phase when you're pre-funding because you're doing it because you love it. It's massive. Having someone to talk to and then talking about the game afterwards is really, really important. I mean, that's, I think, so much what drives online games now as well. These, smaller team games, they're intense as well. Like those, battle royale, it's an interesting medium. It's like, it probably wouldn't, if you tried to sell that into EA 4 years ago, you probably laughed out of the room. It's like, no, I'm going to spend 30 minutes. If I get shot once, I go back to the lobby. People are like, yeah, crazy. So it's really, and I think that's, so part of, so that's Soul Raiders, to wind that back. Soul Raiders is a great game. It has these, primary objectives, secondary objectives, great core loops. It's awesome. And then we're refining that now to like getting feedback from players and operators, because ultimately we need to build a game that people want to play more than once.
Yep.
Which is the first thing. And then build that community. We're not going to say, oh, it's an esport, bro. It's like, no, we're going to build a great competitive game. We're going to start wrapping leagues around it. We're working with our operators and testing some stuff in Melbourne and then Brisbane. How do we get people back? How do we get people to come back? And is it tournament modes? Is it memberships? Trying different business models, because it's not, I can't just download it on my mobile phone for free and monetize it through skins. That whole model does not work.
Yeah.
So you've got it is closer to a sport. But there's massive potential there. Like people, like we're already having people like finish Soul Raiders game and book sessions afterwards. Coming. It's really interesting to see what we're seeing with the game from our data is Soul Raiders is increasingly being played more and more and more, but the other titles are being played the same as they were pre-Soul Raiders. So it's indicating it's bringing in a
different psychographic. So I've been talking about this for a long time. There's a competitive VR game will bring in a different psychographic profile. And so the ability to have co-op, a bunch of co-op games that are adventure-based and role-based, and then a competitive game is going to bring in an entirely different audience.
And not everyone wants a competitive game. That's like some people find it too intense. Some people don't like losing. But for people, I don't like losing.
And talk about your original concept. You talked about this in the early days. The reason you did the co-op game is because you said for $88, which is what you were charging in Melbourne, people don't want to lose.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But that's also like people don't want to lose, and we're like, everyone gets to finish the game. But we experimented where you don't finish the game, and people almost love it more. But it's riskier because does everyone want to have? And I guess also the complexity of location-based. Like you come in a group of 8, we're all old buddies. That's a very different dynamic to you're a pair in 4 pairs, or you're a single person, which is pretty much no one ever comes. The amount of single zero latency tickets is like, it's like 0.001 percentages. It's almost nothing. People always come in a small group. In the standard is like
4, right?
4 to 5. Yeah. So, so coming and playing with your group, but you've got to make these curves where if you come as a low skilled player and a repeatable player, you've got to still have a good time. And that's all the challenges, I think, when we talk about IP. Like they're really, it's a challenge, you know, to balance all that out and to make sure, and that's even in a co-op game, to balance that, let alone a competitive game, to make sure that people are still having fun, because that's the key. Ultimately, people want to have a good time, and then they want to go and talk about it with their buddies. But I say it's interesting with the competitive content. Like, I don't like losing. I'm a pretty good loser. I'm not, but I don't like it. It makes you want to get back in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there was a question about people bumping into each other, and you guys created a really, really creative solution to that. And I was really surprised you kind of put that out there and talked about how you did it and why you did it, which was kind of tipping your hand to the competition a bit, but also create some best practices within the industry.
Yeah.
Talk about how you solved the people bumping into it. I thought it was super creative.
So we did a few different things. Obviously, we've got safety systems embedded in there. We've actually stripped them right back, almost counterintuitively, for PvP, so it's still fun to play. But safety systems, but the shell, like, people don't want to walk through a physical object. They just don't want to do it. There's a lot of evolutionary wiring in your head that makes you not want to walk off a cliff or run into a wall. So, like, if you put a virtual wall near a physical wall, that's a good way to solve that problem. But also, and that's not like anyone that, to be honest, like, yes, it's good to talk about these things, but I think anyone that spends enough time in the medium will figure it out themselves. And, you know,
but then the character size too.
So the character and gun size are slightly bigger than yourself. So if you comfortably avoid the robot, you're not gonna run into them. Which is a cool thing that was sort of designed into the game. Yeah. There's a lot of, and to your point, it's interesting. It's always a balancing act, because we want to talk, like, we do a lot of exciting stuff. We don't want to talk about it all too early, but ultimately, for where we are now, like, we've got, we get hundreds of inquiries a month. They're wanting to buy systems. This is just about, like, with what we're doing with Gen 2, what the industry is waking up to is VR's chance to actually have a fucking crack, pardon my French, to have a crack at the mainstream and to take it out of the niche. Like, you're seeing a winnowing, people that went down the wrong rabbit hole and then they ran out of cash and they've just died in a ditch, like all that terrible stuff that happens, but it's winnowing out. And you've got a cabal of people that are super engaged with their product. They're making great content. They've all got different niches and different models. And I think increasingly, coming together and sharing information is going to be important. Obviously, it's still, everyone's a competitor, but we actually have a crack right now at turning this, like, VR into something that's mainstream, because the in-home market is not flourishing. Location-based is growing, and there's multiple use cases for it. There's, the room scale untethered is one. There's, what Life and his friends, his company do with Hologate, with the tethered experiences. Like, these all have use cases, and I think it's a really good time to be getting together and sharing some of this information, because the industry's got a red hot crack at really embedding. And I think there's some, there's a bit of smack being talked by some pundits in the press about it's niche. It's like, it's not niche. It's a very compelling medium. It's just finding its feet. It's so new. It's not even 10 years old.
And the thing, I just, by the way, speaking of which, coming together and talking about this shit. So Tim's actually going to be flying his ass all the way over on a very long flight to Las Vegas for Amusement Expo.
Sure.
We just published the schedule for the 26th event. It's not in this download. I'll send it out to everybody via email. You need to be there. It's going to be the best. I think it's going to be the best VR conference yet. It's all location-based VR. We'll talk a little bit about education, but it's the intersection of education and entertainment, which I think is interesting. I forgot what I was going to ask you then, because I took that opportunity to promote the Amusement Expo.
The plug.
Yes, it did. Andre. So Andre's asking about full body tracking.
Yes,
he's asked twice, so he really wants to know. How do you feel about full body tracking?
I feel it's completely unnecessary, because and this, I'll just be honest, I'm a pretty upfront person as an Australian, and also as who I am. The first thing you do when you walk in a room isn't touch the walls. Like, who does that? Like, it's cool. Like, I've done the Void. I love that experience, touching the walls. A bit short. The graphics are beautiful. There's no real gameplay, but it's a fun thing to do, and touching stuff's fun. But it's not what keeps people in the experience. You don't need to see your feet. You don't walk and look at your feet.
Can I cut you off on the feet thing? Like, I've had this conversation with a bunch of people that do foot tracking. Go ask an employee who has to put fucking foot trackers on shoes all day long how much they enjoy that. And they will fucking roll their eyes, and you'll see the bile just kind of rise up in their throats. If there's not a compelling reason that you've incorporated feet into the experience, like Dance Dance Revolution or kicking down doors, don't do foot tracking, unless you need it.
You just don't need full body tracking, I don't believe. And you sort of, you know where the head is, you know where the hands are from the gun. Like, with good animation and good game design, I don't think you miss it. And it's that's really, really compelling.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about niche. Thanks for reminding me, Philip. And the other thing about trying is like invest more in the inverse kinematics, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many shitty body models I've gone through where, and some of your early stuff was challenging too. The new stuff's amazing. I mean, it's hard to do, and I don't know how you've cracked it. You probably don't want to talk about it, but there's just through
some really smart people, a lot of money at it.
Yeah. That's how you do it. And do that. Like invest in that and save the operator hassle and the cost and the maintenance around full body tracking.
But also, like I did the Sandbox VR experience, and that's
what I was just referring to.
And like, you know, it was in Hong Kong. It was a sweaty day. Like they obviously hadn't been cleaned properly. There was no visible cleaning regime in the place, and it's a lot to maintain. And you're either going to do it or not. And like even just getting the backpacks ready, the operator overhead for the ROI of that is so low. It's a little bit like haptics as well. Like we've got some vests on the go at the moment, which we're really excited about, but they're heavy. There's more batteries, like there's more cabling, like the let's say it's exponential overhead of adding another component is big, let alone, and then also with hands and feet, there's occlusion. Like that's the reality as well. If you've got optical tracking. And I think if you were to say to me, Tim, would you rather invest time and energy in maintaining optical tracking and nailing hands and feet, or being able to mainstream the platform but the cost is you're not going to see your feet? Like, well, we've already made that decision.
Yeah. And I think the haptics thing too, one of the things I've told Life about the haptic vest they did is like, it's just constantly buzzing. Like there's no actually use haptics to inform the player as to what's happening in the experience to make it a richer experience, or don't do it. Like, don't just do it because you can, because it adds operational complexity, cost, and it just turns out to be distracting.
Life,
68 million for Sandbox.
What do you think about that, Life?
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't. I have an opinion on that. I think everyone is jelly. Yeah. Oh, look, I think man. I hope they can make a crack of it. I see. I see concerns with scaling that model out and the longevity of that piece. But it's a lot of money, man. It's a lot, and you can do a lot with that money. But it's also a big distraction engine as well. Yeah. But look, man, good luck to them. I think that the interesting thing from what's in the press, and I think what's in the press is never the true story, is they're saying mixed reality is their big competitive advantage. And I would be sweating, to be honest, because we're working with Mixcast. That's not a secret, and their technology is really compelling, and it's a super easy platform to integrate, and it's great. Like that mixed reality piece is going to be
it's going to be table stakes. I've been saying that for a year, that everything, because it just solves so many problems for the operator and for marketers.
But I just like to come back because I think like with HP, with Microsoft getting on board, with Sandbox raising that money, like these people who are putting their money and their technology are smart people. They're thinking about it. To me, it is a strong validation of the longevity of the industry as people start to crack it. As people start to, initially when VR money was being raised, and a lot of these companies I think are just, on the side of the road now, but, I'm going to be the picks and shovels of an industry that doesn't exist yet. And that's obviously, there's plenty of cases where that's paid off for VCs, don't get me wrong, but that's a model. I think now people are seeing, all right, here's some compelling use cases that we didn't really think of 5 years ago. And I think to be honest, it's great to see that validation from Andreessen. It's great to see that validation from HP and Microsoft. And we're going to see that, I think, from Vive, from HTC. We're going to probably see that from Oculus eventually. All roads are leading to out of home. And something that I've always said when we're building this business and thinking about it is entertainment always starts out of home. It always has. Like even the book before the printing press was written once and read to many in a congregation. Movies, video games. I mean, computers didn't appear in your pocket on your phone. They were massive communal things you booked time on with cards. Like everything has started out of home as technology and entertainment. Like why would you think VR would be any different? Yeah. And you've got that's just how it is. People like there's still people who've never played a VR experience, let alone a free roam one.
Like 90%, 95% of the world still hasn't done a high end, what we would call VR, right? They've put a cell phone on their face and they've looked around and went, "Oh, that sucks."
If you could go back in time and tell the person that built the VR roller coaster to not do it, that would be awesome. That's turned a lot of because you still get as you're educating people, you still get people go, "Oh, and I tried that VR roller coaster experience." You're like, "Oh, I'm sorry."
Yeah, or a 360 video.
Exactly.
So I want to go back to the niche thing because you talked about, just to finish that thought, is I did a thing in Germany recently around an investor conference. And what came out of it was like VR is going to go to market. It's going to become mainstream through 100 different niches. Like it's all little niches. It's location-based VR. It's medical. It's industrial. It's training. It's education. It's Beat Saber. It's like there's no one use case. There's no one problem that VR solves. And that's what I think everybody was expecting, is it was going to solve the massive problem. This solved the problem of we needed access to the internet. We needed a good browsing experience that wasn't tied to a computer, right? Because we don't spend a lot of time tied to the computers. And so the iPhone was popular and smartphones became popular because they unlocked a great browsing experience. Then all the other shit was just thrown in.
But also, I mean, you could get the internet on your Palm Pilot.
Yeah, but it wasn't very good.
No, it wasn't very good.
And you could get it on your Windows, BlackBerry, Windows Phone, but shitty
interface and app integration, absolutely,
absolutely was huge. And so, so I think that's going to be the. And I would also say that there's no way Sandbox got a $200 million valuation on that. By the way, that was probably a low pre-money valuation deal.
Good luck to the sector.
Yeah, what's going on with the military stuff? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So. Yeah, look, I really like. We've done some. It's not a secret. It's been tweeted about by the general. We've done some work with the Army, which is really, really interesting. Like at a personal level, it's fascinating to see the way those guys work, and especially meeting some of the tier 1 operators, like really impressive human beings. A lot of respect for what they do, to be honest. But for us, like entertainment is just so. Let me the way I look at it is. So we did some work in real estate, did some work in training, we've done work in entertainment. Real estate people are building apartments and trying to sell them. There's many ways to sell an apartment. Soldiers are essentially training ultimately to deliver lethality as effectively as possible over the world. There's many ways to train that. Like VR is part of it, but it's not necessarily their core business. Whereas for entertainment, kind of providing a really compelling entertainment offering is core business for people that run location-based entertainment. So it's right in the center. They get it, they understand it. There's pedigree in that industry. Whereas, with what training wants as well is like every jurisdiction is different. So look at police, their rules of engagement are different. What content, like the languages, the avatars they want. It's not an industry. You can't make one game like Soul Raiders and push it out to every military in the world. That's ultimately like for us, where it's like, look, we're open to those engagements, but we're not actively pursuing them. But look, it was a great experience, and also the fidelity bar for what they need is so high. They need feet, they need hands, they need warehouse flawless tracking. They basically
the weapons have to be exact replicas,
and we did all that. Like we built a fantastic suite with customized backpacks, customized weaponry, like haptics, the whole piece. Like it was really, but still, it's like the way they do not want to detrain. It's a massive fear. So,
detrain means do anything that isn't.
They don't want to reinforce a behavior that isn't what they could do in the field.
They have to build muscle memory, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Especially as go down the rabbit hole of training. But just briefly, the Army has changed a lot in 20 or 30 years. The way that they're training operators is really different. It's not, guns at 500 yards, pop, pop, pop. It's very, very different. And I think there's a massive potential, and the Army certainly gets that. It's just about how they put it into their training continuum. But it's compelling. It's probably actually more compelling, to be honest, for things like tank trainers, where you're like, that's probably better than dismounted soldiers.
And that's where Radon does a lot of that. They're one of the companies I've worked with. They do tank simulators and all of that stuff. And I think it's really, you guys should talk to them again, by the way. Seriously, that's their space. They work in military. They've been doing it for 20 years. Yeah. So the other question that I thought was interesting, and then I think I want to wrap up, is there's this question about Springboard. And I think it's really about content development and stuff like that. How does ZL plan to compete with a competitor like Springboard? And I don't see Springboard as a competitor at this point, but with regards to direct-to-developer content deals, so what they're doing, which is starting, and so what they're doing, they've been licensing content from developers to bring into these room scale things. Like, what's your thoughts around IP, third-party development? Just talk about content development.
Oh, man, absolutely. Like we're actually onboarding. We signed the contract yesterday. Soon to be announced our first third-party bit of IP. It's already actually out there in the wild. It's going to be awesome. So that's.
You can't tease it.
I'd rather not, because that's stealing our collective thunder. But that's really exciting. Bringing on other content. Like we want to be bringing more stuff onto the platform. Like more. We want to bring some AAA stuff on. We want hopefully be announcing something that's really soon. But I think for me it's about firmly believe, and increasingly I feel that's validated by bringing on game IP, like bringing fun games in.
Call of Duty, Halo,
because
CSGO, whatever.
Bringing
right?
in I've just been really underwhelmed with implementations of movie IP. I think there's a lot of overlays of what you can and cannot do, and I think building those, we're an entertainment company, but games is kind of where I think we're getting the most bang for our buck. So but the reality, when you look at a big AAA developer, I mean, Fortnite, March last year, made $320 million
in 1 month,
not Australian pesos, USD, in selling skins to children. It's like you say, that you might be able to make $3 or $4 million in location-based VR. They don't care. So I think it's going to be what I'm hoping to be able to bring, and as part of going to America, we've got a bunch of conferences and meetings on the go, and I'll be doing the same thing in Europe in April, is to start sort of circling the, I don't know, it feels a bit like Game of Thrones. I'm not the Cersei figure in this analogy, but, bringing the Bannermen together and going, look, we've all got bits of the puzzle. We've got content. How do we start sharing some of this? How do we, we don't want to cannibalize each other, but I think back to where we were, thank you, Sean. I look back at where computers were in the 80s, where you had everyone had a platform. You could build them from yourself. There's an Australian entrepreneur that had one. There was a Bumblebee computer, the Acorn. We're kind of there, and it's how do we work together to centralize this? Because it's going to be increasingly easy to bring content onto a free roam platform, but it's still not a walk in the park. You can't get Fortnite put into location based. You can't even get Arizona Sunshine and put. But
you can do battle royale. Everybody wants a battle royale game in free roam VR. Are you guys going to do that? Somebody needs to do that.
Yeah, look, I think I think there's some interesting stuff. Warehouse CS:GO. I think there is a really interesting option. Is how do you make it economically viable? Because there's the dream, and then there's economic viability to be able to set up giant spaces. So people need to come and play it and experience it, but bigger is definitely better. It's just so hard to make that pencil. You could, get a warehouse out for $2 a square foot, an hour and a half from the city, but are people going to come? But there is an incredible.
They would if it was Fortnite.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I think that'd be a very hard game. That'd be a very hard game to bring across. But mate, CS:GO, Rainbow Six, to be able to 400, 600, 8,000 square feet. Man, you could have the thing about what I'm excited about by that concept of having CS:GO in a warehouse is it's interesting. 200 square meters to 2,000 square feet is a good size. 4,000 is a great size. They're all, but you probably only need 6,000 to 8,000 to you can infiltrate in a helicopter. You can clear a few houses and do a few tricks without any kind of flips. Any sort of tricks of moving through the space. You can cover a lot of ground with good gameplay design and really lose yourself. It's just how do we make that work as an industry in terms of it's something you can pop up, but to be honest, I run the numbers on we're running the numbers at the moment and going, okay, what could we do a large scale thing? Because it's super fun. And
I think
big scale.
And I think the Windows Mixed Reality platform helps with that. Because prior to, if you wanted a third party to develop on your platform, they would have had to buy all the infrastructure of the cameras and the full stack. And now you can actually do that as a developer a lot more easily, right?
Yeah, you can. But it's still.
You still need the space. And
it's still it's being really embedded in this business and as a CEO, but also regular experimenting and testing what's happening. It's still super challenging. It's not something you can just even with Windows Mixed Reality, you can't just walk into a warehouse, set it up in 10 minutes, and you're in. There's a lot of environmental prep. There's a lot of work to be done to get that working.
So, is third party development something that's on your radar? Because they would actually, if they're going to develop, it's going to be 6 or 9 months of development. They're going to have a studio, but they could then set that up as a third party to develop something on your platform. Is that something that is in the plans?
So say that again.
So are you going to allow third parties to develop on your platform?
Yeah, absolutely. We're starting to speak to people, and it's really just about how the commercials of that work. Because
awesome.
Ideally, what I want and what we're building is we're at 30 now. This Gen 2 piece. I mean, for under $200,000, we're already we've got existing customers wanting to buy a lot more of them. To someone's question, working on upgrading our existing sites.
Yep.
The bigger the platform, the more people are going to be able to come on and create content and monetize it through more of an app store model. That's a little way away, but at the moment we're finding select partners. We're doing some co-funding development, different models. But it's exciting, man. I feel opening up that creative canvas to more creators, to what can you do on this platform, is super important.
Yeah, and I think that'll touch on the question about non-gun related content. I know you did the puzzle game, right? Which I loved, one best product.
Yeah,
Everybody loved
sweet
it. But
game.
economically, look, people like to shoot things. They like to shoot their friends. They want to be scared. Yeah. Horror is the #1 genre among women, by the way. Like, so drop the narrative of what you think people want in VR and look at the data. The data says horror is the #1 genre amongst females, by the way.
Wow.
The genre says people love to be fucking scared. Hollywood just had back-to-back record years around horror content in Hollywood.
Gnarly stuff too. And I think also there's like, we stumbled onto it just through experimentation, which I love, but then sort of like back reading it, there is like research around intense experiences bond people together, which is why police, fire, soldiers, the brotherhood exists, because you have an intense experience, it bonds you together. That's very deep in the human psyche. So there's, engineering's fantastic game. It's, to be honest, it's pretty intense for some people. Like if you're a hardcore gamer, you're not going to find engineering intense. If you're my mum or you're my 7-year-old kid, you're going to find it pretty intense, and that is going to make you have a more. It's a horses for courses.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. So anyway, we went way over time. I could literally spend all day doing this because there's so much to cover. Anything else you want to just throw out there, or?
No, man. Like I think. Look, what I want to throw out there. I think we've covered a lot of stuff.
We'll have more. We'll have more at Amusement Expo.
Yeah, absolutely. More Amusement Expo. Look, if you're curious and want to find out more about Gen 2, hit us up on the website. We'll reach out to you. We've got some commercial information that we can send out. So look, it's really exciting. And I think, and if you're out there as a, if you're a competitor or a potential content provider, we'd love to hear from you. I think it's a really exciting, 2019 and 2020 are going to be massive years for location-based VR. It's time to get busy. Yeah, cool. Tim Ruse. Thank you, brother. I love you, man. It's my pleasure. I love this guy. These guys are doing amazing work. Thank you so much for making the time. I know you're ridiculously busy. That's right. And by the way, so this will be the webinar for this week. I'm going to cancel the one for Friday. Had a change of schedule and somebody dropped out. And then we'll be back next week with someone interesting. I don't remember who it is, but I'm sure it'll be amazing. And we'll see you all in Las Vegas and online. So don't forget, replay will come out. Share it with your friends. And Bob and Tim, we're out. Thanks for listening. All right. How do we end this thing? Let's see. I think it's right there. See ya.